Today's episode is an important one, especially for you, dear listener, if you're leading group programs, retreats, circles, or workshops. But it's also important, really, for anyone who is working with clients in any capacity. I'm going to be sharing a very important lesson and facilitation tip, one that I personally learned the hard way about 15 years ago when I was leading an in-person retreat. I made a mistake and it was kind of dramatic. I'll be sharing the story with you as well as a case study workup on it with tips, tricks, and lessons. The case study that we're going to be looking at today is actually one of 5 facilitation case studies that I share in the 17-page ebook called Take Your Groups and Retreats to the Next Level. The ebook is free on my website, and I'll share the link for it in today's show notes. I definitely recommend anyone who is leading groups or workshops or circles to take a peek at that ebook because facilitation skills are one of the 3 main pillars of any excellent group experience. And I'll share the 3 pillars briefly with you right now. So the 3 pillars of any excellent group experience are: number 1, incredible curriculum. This is about you articulating your thought leadership, your content points, and the curriculum journey that you create. The second pillar of any excellent group experience or program are your facilitation skills. And your facilitation skills include setting safe and vulnerable group containers, creating a community that is invested and connected. Your facilitation skills include navigating resistance, navigating overshares, drama dealers, Debbie Downers in the group, any kind of attitude that shows up. Your facilitation skills involve knowing how to handle confusion in the group. And they also include how to lead potent experiential exercises, how to set up really productive breakout rooms, and so much more. And then the third pillar for really excellent and life-changing group experiences is your energetics as the leader, how you show up, your confidence, the love that you show up with, your openness, your curiosity, how you create an environment of equality in the group and shared power without hierarchy in the group, and so much more. So again, those 3 pillars are curriculum, facilitation skills, and then your energetics as a leader. And I always like to use a music metaphor on this one. In order to create a really potent piece of music, first you need the music score. That's like your curriculum, right? That's the blueprint. It's the notes that you're gonna play. That's your curriculum, your exercises in your curriculum. The second thing you need for a really powerful piece of music is to know how to play the instrument really, really well, right? It's your skill and ability when it comes to playing. Those are your facilitation skills when it comes to group programs. And then the third piece that you need to create a really moving, potent piece of music is the energetics of the musician, how the musician shows up to use their musical skills and read from the notes, the energy that they bring to the piece of music, their presence, right? Those are your energetics as a leader in your groups. And if you want to learn from me directly on all three of these pillars, there are two opportunities coming up very soon. The first is the Life Changing Courses training. Life Changing Courses is a 10-week, fully comprehensive experience where I take you step by step in order to articulate your thought leadership, your unique ideas, and put them into a curriculum that is deep, that is powerful, where you also craft experiential exercises that are incredibly effective to go with each of your content points. In life-changing courses, I also teach you the facilitation skills that you need to lead groups and to lead them with gravitas, and so that everybody is inspired and moved. And in life-changing courses, we also go deep into your own inner work as a leader. These are your energetics. We look at fears and triggers that come up when you go to lead or think about leading or think about marketing your group programs. And through these 10 weeks, you have access to me personally throughout to read your curriculum and give you feedback. I'll share the link for life-changing courses in the notes. And if you'd like a taste of life-changing courses, then I want to invite you to Secrets to Transformational Group Programs. This is a 3-day, 15-hour online training and retreat. And if you haven't been with me before, it will blow you away. I promise there is so much in these 3 days. I'll drop the link for that as well. Okay, now on to our case study for today. I'm sharing about this big mistake that I made so that you can learn from my mistakes and avoid making them yourself. I've been facilitating groups in person and online for nearly 25 years now, and whoa, have I learned a lot from my experiences, from my wins and successes, but I have learned a lot from my mistakes as well. And even though it's not fun to share about all of the mistakes, I consistently share them with you, with my clients in my programs as well, because I believe so strongly in the power of group work, and I want your group work to be excellent all around. If you can learn from my mistakes, I am here to share them with you. So, about 15 years ago, I was leading a 3-day retreat for a group of clients who had been working with me for a considerable amount of time. Each person in the room had been with me and with the group for at least 5 years, and some of the women in the group had been with me for even longer. We all knew each other very well. We were all very comfortable with each other. And we had all been through a lot of learning and life together as I led this group through the years. Well, on the first evening of this retreat, I prepared a really very special ritual for the group off-site. I took them all in a bus to a location about 40 minutes away to a house in the middle of the woods. This house was owned by another one of my clients. She let me use it for the evening very graciously. And in the back of the house, there was a pool that was gorgeous. And in the evening, as it started getting dark, in the middle of nature, this pool and the surroundings truly felt magical. I crafted a very powerful and sacred ritual in the pool where each woman had an opportunity to go through her own personal journey, culminating in the crossing of a threshold. It was all so potent and special and meaningful. There was a ton of soul connection, crying, and so much laughing. And by the time it ended, it was really quite late at night. But every woman who was there was radiating with a glow of love and power and purpose. It was really all just so, so beautiful. Now, since we ended late and still had to drive back another 40 minutes, I told the group that we would start the next morning a little later than usual at 9:30. The women were all staying at a hotel about 15 minutes from my home, and I was sleeping at home because, well, I always sleep better at home than in a hotel. I was pretty tired when I woke up the next morning to get ready for the retreat, and I allowed myself to be a little slow out the door. But on top of that, there was also some unexpected traffic on the way to the hotel. And so I didn't arrive back at the retreat until 9:45 a.m. It was about 15 minutes after we had said that we would start that morning. Now, as I was driving over, I was definitely a little concerned about this because, as a very strict rule, I am never late when I lead groups. But that morning, I thought that since we all know each other so well, and since I had given the group so much extra time and such a special treat the night before, I thought it wouldn't be such a big deal if I was a few minutes late. Well, I was wrong. I walked into the retreat room at 9:45, and I could see right away from the look on her face that there was one woman in the group who was very not happy. I put my bags down and I took a deep breath. And then I authentically apologized to the room for being late. I let the group know I was also very open if anyone wanted to talk about it. Everyone in the room, except for that one woman who looked very upset, everyone else was smiling and said it was no big deal, etc. But then the one woman spoke up. Her voice had both anger in it as well as some cracks, as if she were holding back tears. And she shared that she was not okay with me being late, and that even though for many years now she felt I was so reliable and that I always showed up with my full presence and care, she also felt that this morning I wasn't being reliable and I wasn't showing up with my full presence and care. And as she was talking, you could really sense that everyone in the room was holding their breath. There was definitely a tense energy that was coming up. You could feel it. And I'll be honest, as this woman was saying all of this, I was feeling a lot of things. I definitely felt a mixture of pain in my heart because it really didn't feel good to have such a beloved client say all of this to me. It really stung. And I was also feeling kind of like an inner cringe because I knew that she was absolutely right. I hadn't been reliable that morning because I showed up late and I didn't let anybody know that I was going to be late. Now, the one thing that I did feel good about in all of this was that I knew that the fact that this woman felt so comfortable to say all of this in the group and to me was because of how well I had created such a strong and loving and safe and vulnerable container with this group, both over the years as well as in this particular retreat. In another scenario, an upset client could have easily not said a word because they didn't want to disrupt the group or look like the one person who had an issue or maybe not want to hurt my feelings. But then that upset client would have carried the upset and resentment around, and it would have ultimately hurt our relationship and the container of the group, and probably the client's progress towards her goals in our work together. So I was actually grateful that this client spoke up, no matter how hard or tough or painful it felt. And at that point, I did what any masterful facilitator would do. Instead of trying to defend myself or coming up with excuses or deflecting, saying it wasn't such a big deal, or look at how much I gave you the night before, right? Or instead of me getting overly emotional or even overly apologetic, I did something very different. I looked my client in the eye. And I looked her in the eye with so, so much love in my heart and so much compassion for her and for myself. And I said to her, "You are absolutely right. It was wrong of me to show up late, no matter what happened last night. And I am very sorry that it's impacted you. It's my top priority for you to know that I am 110% here for you and that you can rely on me in all of the ways that we've agreed upon. I promise I have learned my lesson here and I will do better moving forward." As soon as I said this, you could viscerally feel a deep, soothing exhale in the room. The energy shifted completely and instantly. And my client who was upset, she also softened immediately. And I could see that she felt held and seen and taken care of in that moment. And there were tears in her eyes as she said to me and to the group, "Thank you." And I can see so clearly now that when you were late this morning, Joanna, and I got upset, that it wasn't really about you. And she went on to say, "You've always been there for me." And I see now that this situation reminded me so much of when I was younger and my mother would always show up late to pick me up and she was absent in general. And then my client went on to say, "Wow, I never realized how much that all impacted me. And you, Joanna, you've been such a different and healing model of showing up over the years." It was such a breakthrough moment for this client. She was able to see so much around her wounding and her patterning. And at this point, everyone in the room was tearing up with love and gratitude and deep connection. It was really Just such a beautiful moment that no one could have expected or planned for. And it happened, a lot of it happened because of the ways that I responded to how this client was upset. And of course, a lot of it happened because of the container that was already set in the retreat. Okay, so hopefully you've learned a few really important facilitation and coaching lessons from my story. One is about what I did when I walked into the room when I was late, right? I didn't just ignore that I was late. I didn't just gloss over what happened. I addressed it head on with the group and I took responsibility. Another lesson that I hope you're getting from this story is about how I responded to my client and to the entire room once I was called out. And again, I leaned in, right? I met the moment and I didn't make this client the enemy. I didn't feel victimized. I didn't try to defend. I checked my energetics so that I was showing up with love and compassion for this client, but also for myself. But the facilitation lesson that I really want to hone in on a little bit more for today is this one. As a facilitator, always be clear on your time agreements and uphold your time agreements. No matter how much extra time and energy I had gifted the group the night before at the ritual in the woods, and no matter how close this group was and how well we all knew each other, I was still absolutely in the wrong for coming in even a few minutes late the next day without letting anyone know. We had set an agreement for 9:30 a.m., and it was my responsibility to stick with it. Or if there was an issue getting there at 9:30 a.m., like there was, it was my responsibility to figure out a way to communicate to the group that I would be late. And because I didn't, there was a leak in the group container. And if I hadn't done a ton at the retreat already, that was right. If I hadn't done things masterfully already, if I hadn't created such a tight container, and if I hadn't known how to skillfully respond when the mistake happened, because of that one little mistake, the retreat could have gone sideways very, very fast. So, what I really want you to take from this is that time agreements always matter. If you say you're going to show up at a certain time or break for lunch at a certain time, then honor your agreement. And in line with this, if you say that you're going to end the day at a certain time or end a session at a certain time, don't go overtime. You might think that you're giving extra value because it's more time, but sometimes when you go over, it can trigger people in the room because they feel like they have to stay, even though they were planning on leaving, or it can inconvenience participants in the room. Now, sometimes I need to go a few minutes over and I'll say to the room, I know we said we would end at 5. I think we're going to need an extra 15 minutes here. I hope this is okay. But if you need to leave at 5, leave. I'll catch you up, right? Um, so we want to address it if we have to go just a little bit late. The time agreements you make with your group and also with your one-on-one clients, they're sacred and they're part of holding the container. They're actually an important piece of the work you do together. And when you are clear on your time agreements and you uphold them, it's part of creating safety and openness and trust in the group. And of course, agreements about time are only one type or one category of agreement that you want to consider when you're working with groups. And I'll name a few more categories that you might want to consider right now. There are a lot, but just to think about for now, what are your confidentiality agreements with the group? What are your agreements about how people share and when they share? What are your agreements about how your participants are going to handle resistance should it come up? What are your agreements when people cry in the room? I bring up this little detail because oftentimes in an in-person group, when someone is crying, if there aren't already agreements around this, someone else in the group might go and try to, nurture them and give them a hug, when really what that participant needs is to cry a little bit. And the person going to give them the hug is just trying to comfort themselves, really, by helping someone else stop crying, right? So lots of little details we want to think about when it comes to agreements. And these are just a few to think about. And one thing that's helpful for you to think through when you are leading groups is, what are the agreements and elements that I would want as a participant in a group to feel safe and clean, right? So think about, what is it that you would want to feel safe and clean in a group, and add that to your agreements. You really also want to think through carefully how you're going to set up the agreements. And what I mean by this is, will they go into a contract, or will you name them verbally at the beginning of a group? Are you going to have the group decide on some of this together? What is the best language and way to language the agreements so that they're clear, but so that it also doesn't feel like an environment that has so many strict rules? Okay, so I hope that all of this was really helpful. I told you another one of my embarrassing yet really important stories, and I hope that it was really helpful and that you learned a lot from it. I share about my mistakes, not only for your learning, but I also share about my mistakes and my struggles to normalize for you that no one is perfect, that life is messy, and that mistakes happen. But just because they happen, you don't have to endlessly beat yourself up about it or feel shame. My hope is that as I share my imperfections, it gives you more permission to embrace your imperfections and love yourself in it no matter what. Okay, my friends, as a reminder, take a look at the show notes. You've got links to the 5 facilitation case studies that you can download. You've got a link to life-changing courses. That's the 10-week training. And you've also got a link to secrets to transformational group programs. As always, I am grateful that you spent the time today to listen and to take in. If you enjoyed this episode and got value from it, please leave us a 5-star rating, write a review, and please, please pass on to anyone you know who might really get value from this podcast.